Cristi Cain.
Hi, everybody. As Michelle said, my name is Cristi Cain, and I am mom to Hardy. He is 9 years old now. He is a tetrasomy. We've been part of the registry since he was probably 6 months old or so. When we found out his diagnosis, you guys had just had the conference that we missed by like a week or so. So we waited till the next year. So I was going to show you guys, for those of you that don't know me or Hardy, I was going to show you a quick picture. I'm going to share it. Can everybody see? That's Hardy Man. That was actually last year's picture, maybe, when he started school. Okay, so our journey with seizures has been a wild ride, to say the least. So it first started when I first noticed it when Hardy was about 9 or 10 months old. We actually had an early intervention therapist at our house working with him that day, and he had what I called an episode. Sort of like his eyes rolled back, his head jerked a little, but I had no clue what it was. And she instantly said, "Oh my gosh, I think you just had a seizure." Well, naturally, your brain goes into overload, right? So from then on, we kind of watched, but nothing ever came of it for months. And if, occasionally we would have other episodes, or what I thought were episodes, but never, like I was mentioning to Michelle earlier, you know how when you take your car to the shop because it's making a crazy noise, and when you get it to the shop, it doesn't do that. Well, similar for Hardy, when we would take him to the doctor and ask about these episodes, of course, he would never have one, so nobody could really see. So we did some early testing, kind of just outpatient EEG test, where they stick all the electrodes all over and monitor brain activity. That was probably late 2012, maybe. He was over a year old. And of course we leave feeling defeated because they don't see anything. Nothing shows up. It just says, to keep watching him. So we go on. And then we really hit a wall, so to speak. And he started really showing more of these episodes early 2014. And I have a video that I'll show you in just a second of what his seizures look like. I'll warn you, it's kind of hard to watch. They're not convulsive seizures, so he doesn't necessarily lay out on the floor. But still, as a mom, watching your kid have seizures is not easy. But I finally was able to get some on video. And so Hardy's seizures, well, episodes at the time, started happening more frequently. And, it started with one a week, and then it progressed to, a few a week. And over the course of about 3 to 4 months, early 2015, wait, sorry, my days get all confused, y'all. It's been a while. He really started getting worse. And so I became that mom with the video camera, really my phone, and followed him around every waking minute that I could to try to get him on video, because I felt like that was the only way I was going to be able to show his doctors, what I was talking about and how best to describe him. It was not really easy. So let me show you real quick what they look like. Okay, can everybody see that? And this is from 2017, so this is a little later, but this is what they originally started out as. You'll see his arms flap. And that's what they are. Oh, let me stop that. So imagine him doing that 50, 60 times a day. You know, literally every few minutes he was having a seizure like that. So after we finally got one on video, we were able to show his doctors. And it was on a Friday, and after we left that appointment, we had to be at a children's hospital on Monday for an inpatient EEG. So things started happening really quickly from there. I think in the midst of all that, I had somewhat heard of seizures being, you know, kind of not necessarily real common, but among some other tetras. So it was kind of on our radar of things to watch for. So once we got to the hospital and had his EEG, we were inpatient for 72 hours. They did a various amount of testing while he was under monitoring. We had a brain MRI, things like that. But it was confirmed actually within 24 hours of him being monitored. They said, we have enough data, basically, that they didn't have to continue monitoring him, but they were going to because they wanted to start some medication immediately. And I don't know if anybody here has experience with seizures, but I will say when you're inpatient and doing a video EEG, you're given this little button that it's like a little clicker type button. And so every time you think your child is having a seizure, you're supposed to click the button. So it kind of puts like a mark on the monitoring. So when they go back and review it, they can look at that specific area on the brain activity to see, you know, what in fact it is. And usually at first, when you push the button, alarms go off, nurses come running. It's rather traumatic, especially when you're new and you don't know what's happening. So that first 24 hours was crazy because we were pushing the button, you know, because that's what we were told to do. And, you know, nurses come in and everything okay, and, you know, they start checking vitals and monitoring things. So it was really stressful. And at the same time, it was heartbreaking to sit and watch, knowing that there wasn't anything I could do to stop him at the moment or to help him. And Hardy is also nonverbal, so he's not able to tell me if something hurts or does something feel funny, you know, things bothering him. So that kind of increased the difficulty of helping him. So we initially started medication. One medication led to 2 medications. Eventually, we were on quite a bit at one time. I will say my nature is not a big medicine person, so that was hard for me. I knew he needed something because he obviously couldn't sit and seize day in and day out. So I agreed, you know, to do what we had to do to help him. But always with a notion that it was not really what I wanted to do, and I was always terrified of the side effects. And so, you know, we tried it and we had our ups and downs. We actually had a seizure-free period from late 2015, so roughly a year, a little over a year and a half, well, a year and 3 or 4 months after he was first diagnosed and we started medications, we had a seizure-free period of 10 months, actually, and it was glorious. You know, I thought we were on the right path to not dealing with seizures every single day like we had been. And then he started kindergarten, and a few weeks after kindergarten started, his seizures returned, and worse than ever. And I still don't know why. His doctors don't really know why, other than just change in environment, stress levels changing. So then we were met with the new, you know, problem to deal with, and that is, why did they return and how do we go forward? I don't know if many of you know, but about seizure medications, some of them are what they call benzodiazepines, which can be highly addicting. They kind of liken to an opioid in a sense. And they sort of, the body sort of becomes immune to the dose. So you typically, after so long, you have to increase doses. Well, with increase in dosing comes increase in side effects too. And those were probably the worst part of the medications and the situation in general. We have been through, I've lost count, but probably 10, 11, 12 different medications and various combinations of those mixed together. Naturally, I mean, one can imagine, you know, you sort of take a medication for this, it has this kind of side effect, so you take a medicine for that side effect, and it just compounds. And so once we were faced with the seizures returning, we started sort of changing routines and changing medications and, you know, testing different doses and things like that. And it wasn't, and that went on for months, if not over a year. And I'm a big research person. I like to read medical journals and things like that. My husband thinks I'm a nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff. But as we all know, chromosome 18 conditions are not very common, and we are sort of left to fend for ourselves in a way and learn on our own or learn from each other. So I did a lot of research, and one thing that kept coming up in my research was cannabis. Who would have thought? Not me. You can ask my mother-in-law, who's here. It wasn't her idea either. Hey, sugar. And so secretly, I kind of held on to that idea, and, you know, meanwhile, we, you know, have ER visits because his ammonia levels are too high due to medication issues when we increase the dose too much. You know, we dealt with a tremendous amount of weight gain, which for those of you that don't know, Hardy can get around, but he does have mobility, you know, struggles. He has low muscle tone. And so for him, carrying a lot of extra weight is not ideal in the least. And so, you know, that created a whole nother problem. And in fact, some of the medications actually increased his seizures. And it wasn't until we really took a step back and spoke with several different doctors about it, that we realized, in fact, maybe some of this is stemming from medication. So in June of, let's see, I had to make notes. June of 2017, this is 3 years, almost to the day, of being diagnosed with seizures. At this point, he is now considered to have intractable epilepsy because we have failed so many drugs. Despite having a 10-month seizure-free period, it was really short-lived in the grand scheme of things. So we started, I asked a lot of our doctors, and we had to change neurologists a few times. But I was always upfront with all of our doctors, and I will say, for anyone that wants to know, always write questions down. Don't be afraid to ask doctors questions, because that's what they're there for. All of our Hardy's doctors know when they see me that I have a list of questions, and they're prepared for it. So, but I wanted to start weaning him off of some of the medicines. And it was in sort of this period when we were starting this process of weaning that I realized just how, I guess I always say, how far under and in a fog Hardy really was. Because, when you see somebody day in and day out, you don't see the little changes that actually are quite drastic changes. But when you see it little by little over time, it's hard to know that. So I'm going to show you another picture. This was actually, I was thumbing through pictures one day and came across this one and realized that how much of a fog he was in. And despite being on all this medication for now almost 3 years, we weren't making any progress. And so we made the decision in mid-2017 to start weaning him. And then shortly thereafter, we made the decision quietly to try alternative medicine, and that included CBD oil for his seizures. So let me show you this picture real quick. Okay, so this is my little guy back in October 2015. This was about a little over a year of being on medications. And then November of 2017, that was about 3 months after we started CBD oil. What I like to say too about the October picture is what you can't see because the picture's cropped is Hardy was sitting inside of a huge John Deere tractor. Some friends of ours have some big farm equipment. Hardy loves tractors, as any boy does. And he should have been smiling from ear to ear. But he frankly had no idea where he was. And at the time, it just didn't register that this is what having seizures and trying to medicate one, this is what happens, and this is what they look like. And to be honest, it was really hard looking at that, going back and looking at that, because I felt like I'd failed my child. Despite doing all that I was asked to do from his doctors and, trying to help him, it wasn't working. And so we made the decision to start weaning. Our doctor was okay with sort of not necessarily a cold turkey wean, but, to be off of them within a month or two. I, on the other hand, was totally opposed to that. Hardy is very sensitive to medications. And so we sort of did our own schedule for weaning, to the point that our last medication took over 18 months to wean him off of. I know that sounds crazy and drastic, but I was really trying to avoid any side effects or withdrawals from the weaning process. I mean, he was obviously struggling enough and didn't feel like adding that additional stress on him would be helpful. The weaning process was not easy, but we made it without any serious withdrawals. I think because we went so slow. And subsequently, while we were weaning medication, we also started the CBD oil. And I actually brought his bottle with me so I could show you guys. So this is his oil that he takes. It's called Haley's Hope. We are on a 20-to-1 ratio currently. I don't know if you can see the size, but this is his syringe. He takes about half of it 3 times a day. This has been a lifesaver, truly. Seizures are the one thing that has been the hardest thing to deal with. You know, it affects not only him, but it really affects our entire family. So much so that his brothers, his 2 younger brothers, would know when he was sitting on the floor having a seizure, and when they could talk, they would holler, "Mom, Hardy's having a seizure," you know, and it's heartbreaking. My 3-year-old shouldn't know what a seizure is. You know, he should be able to be a kid and play. But at the same time, I'm grateful that their brothers sort of experience it. They know, and they're there to help their brother. I'll back up just a hair too. When I was doing research on alternative therapies, I kept coming across this book. I don't know if you can see that, but it's called Cannabis Revealed. It was sort of a starting point for learning. I still am by no means an expert, but we've done a lot of trial and error. And, you know, there were times when I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know which way to go, and whether we keep giving Hardy medication and deal with the side effects, or if we try other things. But I'm happy to say today, Hardy is not seizure-free. He still has seizures every day. The video I showed, that's probably at the highlight of, or the highest point of his seizures when they lasted the longest, usually about 20 seconds or so, which doesn't sound like much, but again, when you're having upwards of 100 a day, which he got to, it's a lot. It takes a toll on the body for sure. So we have managed to bring that length of seizure down. They are about half a second, maybe 2 seconds at the most on a bad day now. And he still has anywhere from, 20 to 30 on a good day to 50 or 60 on a bad day. But today, my Hardy doesn't look like the Hardy from 2015. His life is back. His joy is back. He is, he's a happy little guy. And that was what was hard when we first started medications, was I knew that he had a giggle and a laugh in him. He was a happy little kid. And not long after the medication started, you know, all that seemed to go away. And that was a big thing that we talked to his doctors about, was we wanted our boy to have a quality of life. We wanted him to know where he was and know who was around him. And the question was asked early on about Hardy seizures. They are called myoclonic seizures. So we asked, you know, what's the chance of brain damage from seizing? And in Hardy's case, we're told that it's none, maybe minimal. So, you know, there came a point in time where we had to make the decision to give our boy a life or take away everything he knew. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And some of his early doctors weren't, you know, they would rather you stay on medication, not really any alternate stuff. And I will say in Alabama, we are in an illegal state. We do have an affirmative action law, so no worries on our CBD oil, we're safe. We have that to use as our defense. But our doctors here at the time that we started this in 2017 were not allowed to give us any recommendations on any CBD oil. So all of my research was all done by myself. Our doctors really couldn't say a word. And our hospital that we go to is a children's hospital, and it's a teaching hospital. So usually all of our doctors have residents with them. On occasion, we would go and they would not have a resident with them that day. So they might shut the door and ask a few questions, you know. But when it came time to wean him and to start the CBD oil, I did ask his epileptologist his thoughts about it, and basically just asked if I were to do this on my own, to purchase oil and give it to Hardy on my own, would he keep Hardy as a patient? And he agreed, because one thing about the oil is that it can interact with a lot of pharmaceuticals. And at the time we started the oil, Hardy was still on 2 pharmaceuticals. So we knew that there was an interaction there, and you have to monitor levels. So I asked him if he would keep Hardy as a patient, and if he would do lab work for us, and he agreed. So so we do have a supportive doctor here. I know that's not the case everywhere. And, you know, seizures are still a big part of our life, but it's manageable, and we have our little guy who's happy. He's not really happy at the moment. He has a broken leg. He's over the broken leg. He's ready to get the cast off. But otherwise, he is a happy little guy. And we are still working on other alternatives to add to his regimen. They are illegal, but I'm working on getting around that because I feel like his life is worth it, and the risk is worth to give him a life of freedom from seizures. You know, it's not a pleasant thing, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, especially as a child. Nobody wants to watch their child have seizures multiple times a day. I know that's kind of a lot of random info, but that's basically our story. It's been long. You know, it's still with us today, but we still fight for information and how we can best help him, you know, to get to that point. I truly believe that one day we'll get to the point of being seizure free. That's the day, you know, I know will come, and that's our goal.